Hey guys, this video is about Possession by the Shadow. The parts of ourselves that we discard and reject do not vanish and poof away. They get put into a kind of psychic basement, you could say. And unless the situation is relevant enough and charges them, activates them to come up into the surface, to come out of the basement, they are left outside of consciousness. Now, you might think that there is a lock and key for this basement that keeps them at bay, but this is not the case. When the right experience or situation arises, the parts within your shadow also have a key and they can unlock the door and enter our awareness. Now, because these parts are rejected in us, what happens is a rather strange thing. The themes and associations, feelings and thoughts that are constellated in these complexes that are in the basement, we're not always aware of them, get projected out onto other people, onto situations, and even ideas and systems. And so when that happens, we identify with the projection. So it's as if something else is causing this turmoil, this turbulence. They're angry, not me. They're sad, not me. The logic of projection is that's them, not me. And so when that happens, that causes, quite a lot of turbulence. It's a distortion of our perception, which can cause quite a bit of problems. Possession occurs when a complex and emotionally charged theme that is linked to our memories gets activated. When these complexes get activated, they enter through the threshold of awareness and become, well, alive in our psyche, in our minds. They are alive anyway, but they're active, they're charged, they're expressing themselves. And so when that charge increases, they can enter that awareness. And if we are rejecting that complex or part and do not yet have a relationship, a bridge between our ego complex, you could say the main character in the psychic game, our main basis of perception, when there isn't a bridge between the ego complex and these other complexes that perhaps have been denied, what happens instead is the projection occurs. But if that bridge is there and you have talked to that previously denied part of yourself, it may still come up, but at least you can be more aware of it. And that gives you more space and room for maneuver and more time to consider what's going on rather than just acting it out. Now, on a related note, then, what does projection look like? You could say it manifests pretty much in childlike behavior. And we see the collective rejection of the shadow so far in our collective journey of consciousness in phrases such as, don't be a child, that's childish, don't be silly, these kinds of things. But when we're projecting, it's as if that rejected part is someone else and kind of takes over us, in the sense of, the devil possessed my mind, or I don't know what just happened. That was like a different version of me then. When we look back after the projection, if it was severe enough and the consequences were severe enough, that might motivate us to look back and think, that wasn't quite me, but we can definitely go further than that. And as we've discussed, talk with these parts and integrate them. But anyway, the childlike behavior manifests as fierce arguing, la 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 la, I don't want to hear what you're saying, I want you to hear what I'm saying. It can be acting out of anger, like literal violent acts, punching, pushing, storming out, walking away, throwing objects. And it can look like petulance as well. Taking issue with little niggles and things, or just trying to catch people out at lying. It's as if when people are projecting, they're more interested in making sure and proving that the other person is wrong, incompetent, and perhaps even evil. And that takes precedence over trying to have a dialogue to find the truths within both people. So yeah, you can know that projection is happening when a kind of the negative aspect of the inner child comes out to play in quite a destructive way. Now, this relates then to a final important thing about the repression of the shadow, is its close connection to the inner child. We see that in the childish behavior, that link between conditioning and tough experiences that we might have had when we were younger with the behavior that comes out then when we're projecting. And this collective denial of the inner child is an important big issue. We do not give ourselves permission to be sad, to be silly, to go outside of the box. If we go too far outside of the box as far as society is concerned, that can be met with a negative appraisal of what we're doing. And so, yeah, that freedom to be silly is getting repressed. And then we have to go elsewhere to socially sanctified settings to let the inner child out. We get ridiculously drunk at festivals. We go to comedy gigs where comedians play the child instead. And in doing so, gives us a space for a release. But also a space for questioning our norms and our assumptions. There's a lot of value in comedy in a philosophical sense. And when we integrate our shadow, we're also healing the inner child as well. And so people that have integrated their shadow, this works by degrees, but their projections and their defense mechanisms will become less brutish, binary, and childlike the more and more they integrate their shadow. And also, as well, the anima and animus. And so, this is a really important aspect to bear in mind about the shadow integration work. And a final thing, the repression of the shadow is responsible for a great deal of the turbulence that's going on in the world. Wars are fought because of the repression of the shadow and the inner child. Big man dictators and a number of politicians in the West too that are seeking approval and the celebration of the most polished version of their ideal image to try to bring that into life. In either case, this need, this kind of possession from the shadow within to prove our worthiness and our strength, rather than to acknowledge our vulnerability and also feelings of unworthiness as well, many of which are cultivated in our childhood. This pursuit of these projections and these fantasies from the unintegrated shadow causes a great deal of suffering, corruption, lies, conflict. The political problem is partly a psychological problem in that sense. And the more that we integrate the unconscious, the more that we become aware of how shared our humanity is through the archetypes, regardless of place and time. These archetypes and themes of the hero, the healer, the disciple, the teacher, even the entrepreneur, and I think I mentioned the hero, right? These come up again and again. And through seeing these motifs, through integrating our unconscious, we become aware of our shared humanity. And our scope of politics and what's worthy of ethical and moral consideration grows with the expansion of our consciousness as it integrates the unconscious back into it and forms bridges with the unconscious. And what would happen if, at a political level, we acknowledged our repressions and started working on them is we would see a transformation of politics itself. And we would see it in a number of other fields as well, around like how we organize our society, what's the criterion for acceptable and unacceptable behavior, how much does society give different individuals the genuine permission to be themselves. All of these things would be transformed with the acknowledgement of the unconscious, of repression, of the denial of the inner child across much of different societies, civilized societies. And that would be a really interesting set of changes to see. Now, I mention these examples just to show the depth of the challenge and the opportunity and the problem of the denial of this challenge and this opportunity. It doesn't matter what individuals are really in power insofar as they are unconscious. You can replace Putin, you can replace Hitler, you can replace Boris Johnson, Joe Biden, Donald Trump. There will always be an individual substitute for those people. And now if you turn to yourself, and if I turn to myself and ask the question, what would I be like if I was given a great deal of power? If I was the leader of a nation, say, or if I was just even in control of a business? We understand that if we're already projecting and kind of screwing up our lives in a sense through this sort of fractured relationship with the unconscious, what we realize when we see that in ourselves at an individual level is that the consequences of that destructiveness and that denial just get really amplified the more power that you have. And I guess turning to Spider-Man, that's why they're saying when there's great power, there's great responsibility comes from. First and foremost, we have a responsibility to know ourselves, and by knowing ourselves we heal ourselves and we can help others to do the same. We have permission to be ourselves. We can be more individual and unique, and again across society that implication can also be realized. And so, yeah, I mentioned these examples and thought to digress along this route to just give a sense of the depth and scope of why the integration of the shadow and the unconscious more broadly matters. And so, yeah, alongside the thoughts about repression and this, I hope that you found the video useful, insightful, and enjoyable. Have a great day.